Presentation by thanking Mike Maddox and ACCP for the invitation to speak at the Fellows Dinner. The Fellows Dinner is always one of the highlights of the meeting for me because it's a chance to catch up with old friends and meet new ones. Tonight I'm going to share about my personal struggle with what is commonly referred to as long COVID and some of the lessons learned from that experience. I'm going to start by taking you back to July 2020. So early in the month, far left, you can see that my wife and I visited Glacier National Park in Montana with the Kehoes, who were sitting, we're here tonight also. And we've been there, it's just beautiful. And so we enjoyed the scenery, mountain air, did some hiking. And later that month, I developed some COVID-like symptoms. I initially tested negative for COVID back in the day. No at-home test, you had to go in and get tested. And then I tested negative in the beginning, but my symptoms worsened, and I retested and tested positive. And then I stayed at home and tried to ride it out, which is what people were recommending at the time. But then my symptoms worsened. I developed shortness of breath, and so I knew I had to do something. Contacted my primary care physician, who happened to be chair of family medicine at the university where I worked at. He arranged for a direct admit, so I didn't have to go to the ER. And then I was hospitalized for about a month. It was early in the pandemic, so I could not have any visitors for most of my hospital stay. And hospital staff had to gown up every time they came into the room. My only human contact was the occasional visits by hospital staff. I felt lonely and alone. I lost my sense of taste and lost more than 30 pounds. And you can see me, losing 30 pounds is a lot. I have a lot to lose. So my shortness of breath worsened during my hospitalization, and I eventually required high flow oxygen. I sometimes receive CPAP or BiPAP at night, and I have to confess, I still don't understand the difference between the two. So maybe one of the critical care specialists can explain it to me. I hated wearing a mask. And I remember one night when I was struggling to breathe, the ICU nurse looked at me and had in this teacher's voice or military voice, and she told me that if they could not get my oxygen levels up, they had to intubate me and put me on a ventilator. I was really scared. I'm not an ICU specialist, but I know that bad things happen to patients on ventilators. Eventually, I was able to get weaned from high flow oxygen. I was transferred to a regular hospital bed where I could actually receive visitors for the first time. So I still remember the emotion I felt when my wife Esther was able to visit me. When I was discharged on September 1st, you can see me on the right there. You see how skinny I was. And I was so weak that I had to use a walker or a wheelchair. We set up a temporary bed in the family room on the first floor, and it took me several weeks to get strong enough to even go upstairs and take a shower. And you can imagine how good that felt, first shower in over a month. So fast forward to the present. I have irreversible interstitial lung disease as a complication of COVID. I'm getting stronger. My oxygen needs are declining. I carry this oxygenator here. It's kind of my new, early on I was telling my girls it's kind of my new fashion accessory. And but I can go today, I can go long periods without oxygen. I was without oxygen for much of dinner tonight, but I definitely need it when I exercise or leave the house. And of course, giving a talk like this, you really use your lungs, so I have that on right now. But I experience some shortness of breath every day. And the severity of my shortness of breath depends on my level of activity and oxygen dose. If I don't want to experience shortness of breath, I can just stay home and sit in my favorite recliner. But if I do that, I'll never get stronger. So my pulmonary doctor wants me to sweat every day, which means more shortness of breath and discomfort. So I try to push myself every day and get stronger. The past 4 years have been hard. It has tested me. I'm going to share 3 simple lessons that I have learned during this time. The first is, stay humble. I spent the first year recovering at home. During my first trip home to visit my family in Seattle, I remember the profound sadness I felt when I saw the wheelchair attendant holding a sign with my name on it as I departed the airplane. And later, as I reflected on my feelings, I tried to understand why that simple sign made me feel so sad. I realized it was because of my pride. Not the kind of pride that boasts of my accomplishments, but the kind of pride that results from my independence and my ability to solve problems and figure things out myself. I also thought about growing up in an Asian family where my parents immigrated from China. Like most immigrants, they struggled and were able to create a good life for me and my 4 siblings. Asking for help seemed like losing face because it showed I was weak and dependent on others. Some of you are probably wondering, what the heck does he mean by saving face and losing face? For those of you who are not familiar with that concept, Asians have a shame-based culture. Family members are taught to hide their true feelings, problems, or inadequacies to avoid bringing shame to their family. Saving face is about bringing honor to the family. Most of you probably saw the movie Mulan. One of the lyrics from the iconic song Reflection, sung by Leah Salonga, is, "On that day, I'll discover some way to be myself and to make my family proud." It's one of the reasons Asian children work so hard to do well in school, to bring honor to the family. As I was preparing my comments, I thought about Jensen Huang. Jensen is the CEO and co-founder of NVIDIA, the company that makes the chips that support artificial intelligence. NVIDIA's stock has been on a tear recently. And based on the current market value, NVIDIA is now the world's 2nd largest company behind Apple. Jensen is a humble leader and doesn't believe in hierarchies with multiple layers of management. He doesn't have an office and spends his day roaming around the headquarters, visiting with his 50 direct reports. So this is totally flipped on its head. Most companies, they limit the number of direct reports for the CEO. But his reasoning is that the CEO should have the most direct reports because they're the ones that require the least amount of management. He wants to empower them to solve problems. Jensen credits his success to lessons he learned growing up. He was born in Taiwan and grew up in Thailand. When he was 9 years old, his parents sent him and his brother to live with their uncle in the United States to escape the unstable environment and get an education. His uncle sent him to what he thought was a prestigious boarding school in Kentucky. It turned out to be a religious reform academy for troubled kids. Those first few years were tough. Jensen was bullied, and every student had to work. He was assigned to clean toilets. He later spent summers working as a dishwasher and waiter at Denny's, and he credits Denny's with helping him develop interpersonal skills and work under pressure. After graduating with his engineering degree, he got his first job at a computer chip company. With two of his colleagues, he developed a plan for their own chip company on a napkin over meetings at Denny's. It's always those napkins, right? They founded NVIDIA in 1993 with $40,000 and worked out of a condo in the Bay Area. NVIDIA struggled initially, but eventually carved out a successful niche, developing graphics cards for gaming applications. I remember two of my boys that were into gaming, and all the home computers, they made sure that I bought them with an NVIDIA card. In 2014, NVIDIA decided to work on chips for artificial intelligence, and the rest is history. In presentations, Jensen often talks about how much the ability to endure setbacks and suffering develops character and is crucial for success. In a talk to Stanford students, he stated, "I clean more toilets than all of you combined." He goes on to say, "No task is beneath me." He also observed that most Stanford graduates have very high expectations. He stated that people with very high expectations have very low resilience, and then wish them ample doses of pain and suffering. I wonder if we got invited back. He's a firm believer in the phrase, no pain, no gain. Jensen explains it like this: you want greatness out of employees, and greatness is not intelligence. Greatness comes from character, and character is informed out of smart people. It's formed out of people who suffer. Everyone in this room is a highly accomplished and successful person. The criteria for fellowship is rigorous and is largely the same as it was originally drafted by the founding ACCP members. No, I don't wish you pain and suffering, but don't let your professional accomplishments get to your head. Nick Saban, the former Alabama coach, used to describe this as rat poison because he was afraid that the players would eat it and start to believe it and then lose the game. Maybe Kayleen DeBoer should have been taking notes. Learning humility for me means acknowledging that I can no longer do certain things and asking for help. Asking for help is hard, but it's becoming easier. I no longer view it as a sign of weakness. Lesson 2, be grateful. Based on the early reports, I initially hoped that I would experience a complete recovery. When it was clear that my lung disease was irreversible, I struggled to accept it. I had been healthy my entire life. I just returned from a trip to Glacier National Park. A few years earlier, I hiked up to Angel's Landing at Zion National Park. Anyone who's been there, that's a tough hike. I saw others recover completely after severe COVID infections. I was reminded of my loss when I saw old pictures of me or friends traveling all over the world. I became discouraged, which got worse when my mother passed away in 2022. I never became bitter, but I began to doubt God's goodness. I asked the question, why me, God? For those of you who have read the book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins, Confronting your current reality is called the Stockdale Paradox, based on the experience of Admiral Jim Stockdale. Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking U.S. military officer in the Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp during the Vietnam War. He was tortured numerous times during his 8-year imprisonment and was not certain if he would ever see his family again. He survived and was eventually set free. Jim describes it this way: retain faith that you will prevail in the end regardless of your difficulties, and at the same time, confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. Eventually, I accepted my current reality. I was determined to not allow my circumstances to define who I am. My faith helped me during this time. When I was on that treadmill going through pulmonary rehab, I would think about a verse in the Bible, Isaiah 40, chapter 40, verse 31, which says, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." I have much to be thankful for. I have a loving and supportive family. I'm getting stronger, and I am able to do most activities that I did before my illness. I can do short hikes. I play pickleball now instead of tennis. I ride my electric bike around the lake near my house several times a week. I'm able to travel, including international travel. Esther and I recently celebrated our 40th year anniversary by going on a cruise in Greece, and I was able to go on the excursion tours. But I must admit that Acropolis tour was really tough. My university has supported me during my recovery, allowing me to work remotely and on a reduced schedule. And I really want to acknowledge my dean, who's somewhere in the audience, Dean Keith Wilson. He's been very supportive as well. Third lesson, pass it on. It's happening. Baby boomers are retiring. Demographers describe the baby boomer generation as a pig in a python because of the bulge it causes as it ages and moves through society. You can see the baby boomers made up over a third of the U.S. population in 1970. Many of the boomers are now retiring, opening up many opportunities for younger individuals. I was born right in the middle of the baby boomer generation, and will retire sometime next year. The last 10 years have flown by. 10 years ago, I was completing my year as ACCP president. During the last year, I've been cleaning out my offices at the university. It's really interesting what you find. Does anyone else remember name tags? For you youngins, before name badges, we had name tags. So the one that says UW is 50 years old since I was a pharmacist at the University of Washington. So I didn't remember that I saved them, but I found them. I filled up several recycling containers with reprints, because remember this is, I used to copy everything. And so as I go through my stuff, I've had lots of time to reflect on my professional career. I found my perfect calling as a professor and have enjoyed working with colleagues and students. I have had the privilege of serving in many different academic leadership positions, and of course I've also enjoyed my service in ACCP and other professional organizations. During my work as a professor, I've had the privilege of teaching oncology to over 2,000 students. I don't know if my children ever truly understood what I did at work. I don't think any of them ever read any of my publications or the DePiro book. When they were young, I would tell them that I sat in my office, read medical journals, and drank coffee. Professional success carries with it certain responsibilities. Pass it on. Leave the profession in a better place. Teach and mentor the next generation of clinical pharmacists and leaders. Serve in professional pharmacy organizations. Say yes if you are nominated to run for an elected office. I think of the example set for us by the founding members of ACCP. From the time ACCP was formed, the leadership had the vision to establish clinical pharmacy as a specialty within pharmacy. In 1980, only 1 year after ACCP was formed, ACCP began to explore the possibility of submitting a BPS petition to recognize clinical pharmacy as a specialty. Following the recommendations of the task force, a committee was formed to start the work of developing a BPS petition. You can see that in the slide there. So under the leadership of Dr. John Rodman, the committee met for the first time in November 1981. So think about where ACCP was in 1981. The total number of ACCP members was slightly over 100. And that included the 29 founding members. ACCP had no staff and no headquarters. And back then, of course, everything was on computers, so you had to type any documents, such as a petition. So the petition was submitted to BPS, initially denied because the term clinical pharmacy was viewed as being too broad, and then resubmitted for pharmacotherapy as a specialty. Despite opposition from the major pharmacy organizations, BPS approved the ACCP petition to recognize pharmacotherapy as a specialty in October of 1988. The first pharmacotherapy exam was offered in conjunction with the ACCP annual meeting in Minneapolis in August of 1991, nearly 10 years after the committee met for the first time. ACCP's decision to develop a BPS petition stimulated other pharmacy organizations to pursue other specialties. Can you imagine where our profession would be if we didn't have credentialing through BPS specialties? This is the gift. This is the gift that was left to us from the founding members. So you can see that we're currently at 15 specialties, and we have job analyses, which is the first step in a new specialties going on in 3 more. And you can see the growth here in the number of board-certified specialists over the last 10 years. To date, over 60,000 pharmacists have become board certified. It's a pretty large number considering we only have roughly 300,000 pharmacists overall in the United States. For the past 30 plus years, ACCP and BPS have worked together to grow clinical pharmacy as a profession. 2/3 of ACCP members are board certified. That relationship is one reason that I chose to serve on the BPS board of directors. Finally, develop an identity outside of work, because someday you lose that identity. Soon I will no longer be a professor, and no one will call me Dr. Yee. Fortunately, I've been able to maintain an identity outside of work. I'm an adopted child of God. I'm a husband to my wife, Esther. I'm a father to my 5 children, and I'm a gong to my 10 grandchildren. Gong is one of the Chinese words for grandpa. Coming to the meeting in Phoenix is a full circle moment for me. You see, I attended my very first ACCP meeting in Scottsdale in the summer of 1981. I remember presenting the results of my research in a podium session. I drove to the meeting in my little Honda Accord, packed with all of my worldly possessions, because I was moving from Memphis to Seattle for my first job. I'm grateful for ACCP. ACCP has provided me a professional home for over 40 years. I met most of my closest professional friends at ACCP meetings, and it's truly been a privilege to work with many talented individuals to advance the profession. I want to end by offering my personal congratulations to the new fellows. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and best wishes for a productive meeting. Thank you.